Skip. Vital information, it's just how we play the game. Lay the claim to every statistic, this is the mainframe. For everything important and sporting on your opponents. Analyzing everything, nothing that we ain't noticed. It's a deep dive with the fantasy vibes. Made it Greek fine, got it all right here. It's Tyler Ghee time.
Welcome on in to another episode of Vital Fantasy Football Information. My name is Tyler Ghee, and I will be your host this evening. Thank all of you that are tuning in on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or if you're on the Periscope, thank you all so much. This week, we're going to be doing it over Jarvis Landry and just kind of talking about everything that happens there and what we can expect from this young man that just had an awesome game not but too long ago. So let's talk about Jarvis Landry. Jarvis Landry is 26 years old, which kind of surprised me a little bit because he's been in the league for so long. I kind of expected him to be a little older. He is 5'11", 205 pounds, and he was drafted in the second round by Miami from LSU. Currently, he is in the concussion protocol as the time of this recording. Looking at some injury predictors and some other things that have happened in his past, luckily he's never been in concussion protocol. He's only had a few foot and knee injuries, but nothing major. Let's talk about Jarvis Landry's career, though. When we talk about Jarvis Landry's career, we don't think about a decent little wide receiver. We think of a pretty good one, and most of that has been on volume. So just think for a second, what is the least amount of targets Jarvis Landry has ever seen in his entire career? Answer to that question is his rookie year, 2014. His rookie year, he had 112 targets. A rookie had well over 100 targets. That's insane. And that was his least. The years following, 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018, follow as 166 targets, 131 targets, 161 targets. 149 targets last year, and then we're opening up thus far with 33 targets this year. As of this year, he also has a catch rate of 54.5% on those targets that he saw. And I wanted to go back. I wanted to look back at his previous years. This is typical. Like 55% isn't exactly a strong catch rate, 54 to 55%. So I looked. In 2018, Jarvis Landry had a 54.36 reception rate. Kind of very similar to what we're seeing now. A lot of this could be to the Browns and the wide receivers that they're seeing, but that's kind of where we're at. And I was like, okay, well, maybe that's just him as a player. Like maybe he's not able to catch as well as he does. Well, in 2017, 16, 15, and 14, the years that he was at Miami, his catch rate was actually much higher. Had a catch rate of 69%, 71%, 66, and then 75. So what this tells us is that actually the quarterbacks for the Browns have actually been giving him less viable options as far as targets go than Miami, which is a little concerning being that Ryan Tannehill was his quarterback. Unless by some miraculous state, Jarvis Landry stopped catching the ball as well from one team to the other, which I doubt happened. So let's talk about their finishes, though, for Jarvis Landry in his career. Think about it really quick. What is the average over the last 5 years? What average finish has Jarvis Landry seen? Answer to that question is he has averaged as wide receiver 16.4. Basically, almost wide receiver 16 to 17. That comes even off of his terrible year last year, where he finished lower as wide receiver 18 for Freddie Kitchens. I think the biggest problem with Jarvis Landry was, well, what do we do as far as OBJ coming in? I mean, when OBJ came in, we all just kind of scratched our head and went, I guess Jarvis Landry doesn't exist anymore. Like he's not important, ? Because we've seen his entire career, basically Jarvis Landry has been the main wide receiver. He's had some people help out, some Kenny Stills and this, that, and the other. But the main guy has kind of been Jarvis Landry, even his rookie year to demand 112 targets. That's not exactly a little bit of targets. I mean, that's quite a few. So let's look at 2019 and let's see what he's done thus far. In 2019, he has played 4 games. In those 4 games, his wide receiver points in PPR have been 11.7, 6.2, 9.2, and then last week against Baltimore, 24.7. The amount of points that he has accumulated thus far this year has put him at wide receiver 33 in PPR formats. This is with him playing 96% of the snaps in 2019. But I thought what was really interesting was that big game in Baltimore, the 24.7 fantasy points. He got this with 0 touchdowns, none. And I was like, that's a lot of friggin' points for no touchdowns. He had 167 yards that game and 8 receptions. So then I was like, okay, 167 yards. That is the most yards Landry has ever gotten in his career. That's actually more than the 3 games he played week 1, 2, and 3 put together. That's just crazy to me. With his 33 targets, he is 21st in the NFL on those targets. And this year, he has 328 yards. And here's what I thought was really interesting. If you watch the game from Baltimore, he had a huge run where actually he was running, and then he tripped, and he had like the longest trip known to man. If you don't believe me, go ahead and Google it. Google Jarvis Landry, and you'll see this man literally stumble and fall for like 18 minutes. I don't know. Anyways, so he had 328 yards this season. 172 of them are yards after carry, which is the third best in the NFL on just these 4 games. So what that tells me is that Jarvis Landry is more than half of his yards are actually coming after the catch. So 4th best. So then it was like, okay, let's look at the last year. Is this typical? Is this what we can expect from Jarvis Landry? In 2018, his first year of the Browns, his yards after catch were only 233. That means within the 4 games that he's already played, he's actually passed the yards per catch almost on 4 games, 172 compared to 233. But then I was like, is that typical for his career? So I went back all the way back. In Miami, last year in Miami, 2017, he had 498, so quite a few yards after catch. 2016, 618 yards after catch in Miami. And in 2015, 538 yards after catch. And then in 2014, his rookie year, 638 yards after catch in Miami, which I thought was odd. It's like he was having all these yards after catch in Miami, and then he goes to the Browns last year in 2018, and then he just dropped like a rock. The only thing that I can think of is about 2 different things. And once again, if somebody out there in the Twitter world can enlighten me, tweet at me at Tyler Ghee NFL, and maybe you know. But the yards after catch is kind of a hard statistic. Like, why would that go up or down? Because obviously we want that to go up, him being a better player. One statistic I thought would be maybe the quarterback able to lead the receiver. A lot of times you'll see terrible throws go to the wide receiver, and they have to basically catch it and fall right down. There's no chance for them to run after they catch the ball because it wasn't led in a motion to where they could catch, turn, and then proceed upfield. The other thing is obviously the defense, the type of defense that they are playing. Does it allow for like if it's man coverage, is it able to just, as soon as he catches the ball, he gets tackled and then he's just down? That's maybe a defensive question that, maybe the IDP guys who I'm associated with at IDP guys could answer. But yeah, so it's kind of weird to see his yards after catch go down last year. And then this year we're starting to see it go up, which I think means that we could see a progression from Jarvis Landry from his fantasy points for last year. So let's talk about the market share. You know me, big fan of market share. So let's talk about it a little bit. In 2019, who leads the Browns in the target share for targets? That is Odell Beckham Jr. with 28.67% of the target share, which I think we all kind of expected. OBJ has 41 targets. Right behind him, though, is Jarvis Landry at 21 or almost 22% of the targets with 33 targets. The person behind him, Nick Chubb, and then Damon Ratley. So not a whole lot. Like, it kind of just looks like their passing options include OBJ and Jarvis Landry and then Nick Chubb. So then it was like, okay, we had this conundrum of like, okay, so OBJ comes in, how does this affect Jarvis Landry and how does this affect the Brown, and especially as far as the target shares go? Well, Jarvis Landry last year, what percentage of the market share did Jarvis Landry get? Last year, Jarvis Landry got 27.88% of the target share, considerably less than what he's getting now. Actually, basically, OBJ is getting the same target share that Jarvis Landry saw. But what I thought was interesting was the fact the next person after Jarvis Landry in 2018 was David Njoku with 15%, Antonio Callaway with 14%, Duke Johnson with 11%, Rashad Higgins with 9%. Basically, what happened was in 2018, the Browns have spread the ball around with Jarvis Landry becoming more of the lion's share in 2018. But what we're seeing now in 2019 is basically the ball is going to 3 people: OBJ, Jarvis Landry, Nick Chubb. Like, granted, David Njoku's been hurt for a while, but like those are the people they're going to. So it doesn't actually hurt as much as you would think. Like, Jarvis Landry is still a good wide receiver, so he's still getting the ball. Now, he's not getting as much as he did last year, not the same percentage, but he's still getting the ball. Also, when I talk about market share, it's important to talk about how many passing attempts. In 2018, he had 602 passing attempts. The Browns had 602 passing attempts. This year, they have 154 so far with their 4 games, which puts them on pace for 616 passing attempts. So it doesn't look like they're passing it any more or less than they did last year. Now, that could change because Baker's the only quarterback they have this year compared to last year, was a big circus. Doing a little research on market share, this is the lowest that Jarvis Landry has ever had as far as market share goes. In 2017, 28%. In 2016, 28%. In 2015, 30%. This is the lowest market share that Jarvis Landry has ever seen. So that's not good. I think that actually takes away from him. Last but not least, a good friend of the show, Peter Howard, always likes me to talk about the weighted opportunity ratio, which I've had some people reach out and say, what is that? It's the weighted average that incorporates a player's share of the team's target and the share of team yards. They make this up by taking 1.5, multiplying it to the target share, and then 0.7 and multiplying it to the air yards market share, and just kind of getting a number. To give you an estimate of like where most people are at, OBJ, Hopkins, those type of people usually between 0.7 and 0.8. Right now, if I did my research correctly, Jarvis Landry should be at 0.56, which is tied for 24th best in the NFL. So he's still doing pretty good. He's at top option. Last but not least, with Jarvis Landry, I like to talk about red zone. Think about red zones for the Browns. Who is getting the ball in the red zone? Who is it? And if so, what's? I bet you, I know what you did. You said OBJ, didn't you? Well, here's the thing. OBJ is not leading the team in red zone targets. He's not. You know who's leading the team with red zone targets? Jarvis freaking Landry. Has six red zone targets. Nick Chubb has 3 targets. Damian Ratley has 3 as well. OBJ only has 2. David Njoku has 1. Which means that if you put Nick Chubb, OBJ's, and David Njoku's, all the red zone targets together, it equals the amount of red zone targets that Jarvis Landry has. What? When did this happen? And what's even weirder about his red zone targets is looking at the history. He's not particularly like super awesome at red zone targets. The guy is 5'11". Like, he's not exactly a monster of a dude. He seems to be a high target, high yards after catch type of player. He's not a go up and get him kind of red zone person, but for some reason, Baker wants to find him there, or the Cleveland Browns, or someone does. I don't know who. Somebody's want to. But he is high in red zone targets, which is good for us eventually scoring a touchdown, despite him not scoring one this year. So all that's well and great. We talked about how his catch rate has gone down. We've talked about how his yards after catch went down in 2018, but could be going back up. We talked about how his red zone targets are going up. And we've also talked about how his market share has never been lower. So what does that do for us? Like, what do we do as far as moving forward and predicting what he's going to do? Well, one statistic I like to bust out from time to time is the points per opportunity. This is fantasy points divided by the number of targets or rushes a player has. This is kind of a crude mechanic, but you'll be surprised how actually accurate this is in a lot of different ways. Just because it's so simple, it almost works. So in 2019, so far, he has 1.54 points per opportunity. Which means he gets 1.5 about fantasy points for every target he sees. In 2018, it was his lowest at 1.36. And in 2017, he had 1.64. And in 2016, he had 1.77. This was the year that he had those big year with all those touchdowns and was doing fantastic for Miami. As of right now, the 16-game pace, suffice he doesn't get a concussion. He comes out of his concussion protocol quick. He's on pace for 132 targets, which is quite a bit of targets for a wide receiver to get. But in the world of Jarvis Landry, that's actually, I wouldn't say bad, but not, it's kind of in the middle. You see a lot of Jarvis Landry getting 160, 150 targets. That's his best. His worst was 112. So that's kind of like a middle type pace, I guess you could say. If he keeps the same reception of 54% to, let's just even go to 60, he's going to get 72 to 78 receptions. So then I took his points per opportunity. Let's just say it stays at 1.5 because he kind of hovers around that as a player. Okay, 132 targets, 1.5 fantasy points per target basically puts him at 200 points, which will put him as wide receiver 23 last year. So as of right now, I think it's safe to say, suffice he keeps playing, I think Jarvis Landry is going to finish as a wide receiver 2 for you, which is really awesome. What do we do? Do we buy him? Do we sell him? I mean, what's going on? Here's my opinion. For some reason, Jarvis Landry just does not get the respect that he's supposed to get. And I think that, OBJ coming in made it even worse. Like, people just didn't know what to do. And so we just thought, okay, what's happening? The way the Browns are basically playing is, once again, those 3 targets. It's Chubb, OBJ, and Jarvis Landry. Those are the people they're going to, which rightfully so. I mean, what coaching staff wouldn't just use their best players on their team? I think that it's safe to say that Jarvis is going to be a wide receiver 2/high wide receiver 3. I think that's a safe floor. And I'm okay buying him because I feel like that's what that people are kind of selling him at that or even less. So in redraft, go and see if you can get him, especially if he's hurt this week. It's kind of weird to buy him on a, I don't know, kind of a boom week, if you will, with him getting so many points. It's kind of a little awkward to play around, but I think he's gettable in redraft. In Dynasty, though, he is going as wide receiver 27 and startup. Here's some trades that I've seen go for him so far. Here's some trades. Ready? John Ross for Jarvis Landry, straight up. A second-round rookie pick for Jarvis Landry, straight up. And these are recent. This is not like me like a few months ago. No. This is like a week or two ago. Not even. For some reason, I kept seeing this Alexander Mattison. I saw like 3 or 4 trades. A backup running back for Jarvis Landry. And then I saw Curtis Samuel go for them. And I know there's some Curtis Samuel truthers, so, whatever. But to me, John Ross and Curtis Samuel are what I want. Like, I want them to be a wide receiver too. And I'm sitting here telling you that Jarvis Landry is going to get 132 targets this year and possibly finish as a wide receiver 2. And his average wide receiver position is 16.4 for the last few years. Even if you take away the outliers, let's just say, I think it's safe to say that's what I want all of these players to be, is a wide receiver 2 option, a second option. I think Jarvis Landry is super undervalued. And I think that all the concerns, all the narratives we saw in the offseason with OBJ coming in are valid, but they're also, I feel like we overcorrected. We kind of swerved into one lane and just rammed into the other. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to Vital Fantasy Football Information. I do these every week. If you like this episode, go check out previous ones. I'm seeing some people review on iTunes. I really appreciate that. I really do. It warms my heart. And I've had a couple of people tweet out saying, hey, you have to listen to this pod. I really appreciate that too. Like, just the hard work and just hearing this happen. So because of that, I do want to take a moment and just give a shout out to a handful of these different websites. The first, of course, is the IDP guys and Dynasty Digest. This is my home. These are the great group of people that I work with every single day. Thank you all so much. Nate, you record and help and produce and all this. I couldn't do this without you, no doubt. On top of that, there's some websites that I use all the time for the statistics. And if so you're curious, check these websites out as well. Of course, I go to FF Statistics is the main one, ran by Addison Hayes. Fantastic website, ton of great content. Another website that I use is NFL Savant. Another one is Fantasy Data. So I know there's some other writers that write for Fantasy Data. Thank you all. Some great stuff there. Another one is Dynasty Process. Some Tan Ho from the DLF chapter there. Really good sortable data. Air Yards is a big one, of course. And I think most people kind of know about Air Yards. And then finally, DLF, and I use that for my trade calculators and a few other things. And some of this, too, is the stats that I just sit down and I make and I just figure out and I just kind of play around with and all that jazz. So I've had some people reach out and say, hey, Tyler, where do you get this information? That's where I get this information. I play around with those various websites and also just doing a little Googling and researching. So thank you all so much for tuning into this episode. Be sure to follow me at Tyler Ghee NFL. And thank you for your time, and I can't wait to see you next week. If you can come up with any players I need to do, absolutely. Thank you all, and I'll see you next week.